Welcome to the Relational Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Wes Thompson, joined by my co-host, Austin Hill. Today we're talking about willingness to be taught and how that relates to our recovery. So thanks for listening. We hope this is helpful. Howdy, Austin.
Hey, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing all right, man. Doing all right. It's beautiful outside, and that's always great when it starts to look like summer. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. Today I wanted to talk about willingness to be taught and how that relates to humility and ultimately how that's so vital when we think about life change, transformation, addiction. You know, I think willingness to be taught, I think is a cornerstone of recovery. Because like I said, it reflects a posture of humility that's necessary for that change to happen. I think addiction by its nature, we often see denial. We see a need for control. And as we've talked about many times before, isolation being a big component of addiction. So I think a willingness to be taught signals a break from that pattern. It acknowledges the reality that none of us know everything, that I can do this on my own. And so, I just wanted to talk about that. Willingness to be taught is a principle at the Refuge where we work and the addiction community we're a part of. But I think it's important across the board. So oftentimes I think one of the factors that leads us into addictive patterns is just relational breakdown that leads to distrust. I think oftentimes we're not willing to be taught because we don't trust anybody. And so if one ditch is I'm a know-it-all, the other ditch is I just don't trust anybody to help me because other people let me down and hurt me. And I think both need the same prescription though, and that prescription is you're not going to be able to grow on your own. And so the person who's been wounded and hurt and doesn't trust anyone, it's like the belief that often we leave those situations with is I can't trust anybody. A truer belief is probably something to the effect of I can't trust everybody, but certainly there's people in this world that are trustworthy. I need to find those people, and I need to allow myself to learn from them. And then the egotistical person just needs to realize they don't know it all. None of us know everything. And, question when I find know-it-allism in myself or see it in others, and often a question that we could ask in those situations is like, how's that working for you? So a part of finding those trustworthy people is humbling ourselves, is humbling ourselves. And so the first thing is really seeing humility as the entry point when we think about willingness to be taught. We hear like recovery begins often with admitting our powerlessness, which itself is an act of humility. And willingness to be taught is this ability to learn from other people. I'm open to guidance. I'm willing to learn from others who've been where I am, or who see things that I can't yet see. There's a passage in Proverbs that's pretty intense. It says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, and whoever hates correction is stupid. So that's pretty straightforward, but
It seems to be.
But humility is a big part of growth. Yeah. And humility is obviously the antithesis of pride, or know-it-allism. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, and I think it's seeing humility as a strength, as a posture of courage, not of subservience or like weakness. Being humble isn't saying it's like, oh, I don't know anything. I don't deserve any credit. It's being honest about like what it is, like what we bring to a situation, what we bring to a relationship, and having a willingness to see other perspectives or hear other things and not scare us if something's new. That's the attitude of being open to learn something is not one of fear, it's of curiosity. And that's the sign of like growing wisdom and maturity. So being able to hear things that you don't agree with and not freak out about them, that's a humble attitude. It's being solid in what you believe and have the, like, be strong enough in those things, in the things that make you who you are, that you're not shattered if somebody contradicts it or comes after it. That's like, humbleness isn't just, oh, you're right. I didn't know that. Or it's not this kind of lowly willingness to just be like treated as a welcome mat. It's, I'm open and willing to understand or learn something.
Yeah, it kind of comes from that just premise that like none of us is as smart as all of us. Like, to your point, it's not a devaluing of myself, my own opinions, but it's realizing that there are other opinions and thoughts, and by learning from those, it's really helpful, and it's really a good way forward. I think another thing as it relates to willingness to be taught is really disrupting the addictive mindset, because addiction thrives on rigidity and repetition. In other words, it tells the person this is the only way to cope, this behavior, this addictive behavior. Or, we get stuck in that feeling of no one else understands what I'm going through. And willingness to be taught introduces a new perspective, a new way of thinking and feeling and relating. It's a direct challenge, as we were talking about, to this self-reliant mindset that often accompanies addiction.
I think guys who are in the refuge, I think, have this wonderful point where they're able to start really deciding how humble they want to be, because they've gone through this really difficult, humiliating experience of acknowledging that I am now controlled by something outside of myself, acknowledging that I have an addiction. That can be humiliating, but it can be the spark of stepping into a humble way of living. So I think what both of these things, I like, there's a deep connection between humiliation and humility, because they both challenge ego and pride. And both do result in us acknowledging our own limitations. But humiliation is something that, like, if you're looking at it in an unhealthy way, it makes you go beyond this acknowledgement of my own, like, self-importance. It leads to this, like, low self-esteem. And that's not what humbleness is. Humbleness is you can meet it in that same moment of, like, I need help. But I'm making the courageous choice to seek out that help instead of running away from it.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I think another one is realizing that we can learn new patterns. In other words, recovery is not just about stopping something destructive. It's about learning new life-giving habits and beliefs. Like, addiction is in some ways a form of a habit, and it's like, not all habits are bad. It's finding healthier, replacing it with healthier habits. This includes, learning how to regulate my emotions better, learning newer and healthier relational skills, spiritual disciplines, and just healthy self-care, right? A teachable spirit creates space for these new patterns to form. Kind of speaking to that kind of rigidity that I mentioned earlier. It's like when we're really rigid, it's like, this is the only thing this is all I have. This is the only way. And I think learning new patterns is acknowledging a willingness to be taught, this ability to say, hey, this is a pattern I'm in. Can I recognize that? It's an unhealthy pattern. Well, I can learn a new pattern. I can learn a new way, a new habit.
Yeah, I think it's also this great step-by-step process that that is put there for us when we realize that our willingness to be taught means that it's a lifelong practice. It's not something that we're going to do for a season and then I don't have to learn anymore. Because I think a mark of an older person who is who you don't want to be around are the people who think they know everything and they don't want to learn anymore. They're no longer curious. Like, I think we can all identify people who are at the end of their life and we want to be around them. It's because they're curious. They want to keep learning. Like, they're enjoyable to be around. But the people that are kind of bitter and especially at the end of life and they don't want, like, they're just angry all the time. It's because it seems like I experience them often as not willing to understand or learn something new because they just know everything. It's like, oh, I see that. This is what it is. I can't learn anything new. And so instead of, why I'm pointing that out is I think some guys get this, can get this a little off where they're like, well, only people who are learning, those are the people who can't be leaders because they're learning. Like, I can't be a leader because I'm still learning. But I think the best leaders are the most teachable people. Because, like, great leaders start with listening. They listen first. And then they're listening not just to learn what to do, but how to be present with others. And so being a good listener, being willing to be taught is a excellent pathway into being a better leader in your own life, wherever you end up in life or wherever you're at. So this willingness to be taught isn't just I have to learn this because I didn't know these things and I'm going to understand it so then I can be a leader and teach other people. This attitude of being willing to be taught is a lifelong practice that I think produces the best type of leaders, are the ones who are always and want to be the most teachable.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I think, the moment we think that there's nothing more to learn, that's an indication that something bad has happened.
Yeah, it's about to happen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or you're planting the seeds for stuff to go sideways real fast.
Yeah, there's always more to learn. And there's always different perspectives. And so I think even if we have strong convictions around a particular thing, it's good to be open to others because there's other perspectives, and we might find a new perspective that serves us better than our current one. And I think the openness and the curiosity you were speaking to earlier really addresses that, just the importance of it.
Yeah.
Another important thing as it relates to willingness to be taught is receiving from community. I mean, this really speaks to the fact that this isn't a solo pursuit, which willingness to be taught really addresses. Like, this implies a willingness to be in community, right? Whether it's a 12-step sponsor, a therapist, a mentor, a pastor, a supportive group, recovery requires other people, right? A teachable person's more able to receive correction, encouragement, and accountability from others. Because if we don't open ourselves up to that, we're only listening to ourselves. And as we've already said, that's limiting. That's limiting because I only know what I know and I'm limited. So by opening myself up to community, I'm allowing others to speak into me. And that's critical as we think about growing as healthier people. It's critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's this invitation that we have when we decide to step into a community, that we are opening ourselves up to be spoken to in ways that we're not used to, in healthy and unhealthy ways. But through that process, we're always learning, like, we're kind of getting our rough edges sanded off and we're getting a little bit stronger every time we go through these processes. Because what a community does is it's not just like the list you gave earlier of like who we want to find. Those are people who have more, like, acknowledging they have more experience, knowledge, and wisdom than we do. We need those people, but also it's going into a community of peers and learning from them also, because the people that you listen, like our mentors should be in a community too. They should be in something where someone is speaking at a peer level to them. And then also again, I think the best leaders are the most teachable. And just by like how the world works, if you're a leader, that means someone is reporting to you or is listening to you, or you're giving direction. And if you're being willing to be taught by someone who reports to you, that's like this opposite, almost subtle difference between, instead of it being like there has to be this top-down hierarchy, what a willingness to be taught highlights is that if we're truly living this out, there is a top-down hierarchy for what is needed, but it's not so rigid, like you said earlier, where the person who's in charge knows everything. It's we are learning together. This like co-learning between peers, those that we report to or report to us. It's that humbleness that's required, that courage in the humbleness is required in order for this to go well with community, because the best communities aren't just full of peers. They have leaders. They have people that we're mentoring, that we're like teaching how to improve. Like, what does it mean to be a part of this group? Because there's always that tension, and it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing when it is, when the community agrees and holds each other accountable to what it means to always have an attitude of learning.
That's really good. Yeah, and then lastly, this willingness to be taught is directly there's just a direct correlation in how that relates to our spiritual transformation. I mean, from a Christian perspective, willingness aligns with discipleship, being shaped by Christ, being shaped by the Spirit of God. Romans 12:2 says, the Apostle Paul's writing this. He says, "Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Right? And this renewing comes in part through a posture that says, "Teach me, Lord, show me a new way." And oftentimes God uses other people to teach us and to challenge us. And so all of this fits within even just a Christian worldview that we are, as we call this podcast, right? Relational recovery. We're made by a relational God. We're made to be in relationship with other people. And it makes sense that if we're oriented that way in our very nature, that's what's required if we're going to grow and we're going to become healthier people. Is it requires us to engage, to bring our full selves to the table and speaking the things that we've learned and that we've grown in, but also to receive from other people is a big part of what it means to be people of faith, to follow the life that Christ modeled for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is when we hear the word spiritual formation or transformation, it like a lot of us go right to like the intellectual, like after what I'm reading or thinking and like praying about. That's good, but what this willingness to be taught, I think, points to is that spiritual learning isn't only intellectual, it's relational and like tactile. Like it's something we experience and go through. Like the patterns and rhythms that we have in a healthy life are being hospitable and welcoming, having like a healthy rhythm of work and rest, sharing meals with each other. Like those all have like there's levels of humility and acknowledging that I'm learning something more just by those type of like things that oftentimes we wouldn't acknowledge as a spiritual formation, but sharing a meal is, resting is, taking a nap, having a what you would call a meaningless conversation with someone that helps you connect with them. Those are all parts of this willingness to be taught that lead us to a stronger foundation in our belief in who Jesus is, and by him modeling these like mundane things, gives us that like blueprint of what it looks like to constantly be learning.
Yes. So as we bring this conversation to a close, I think we just need to all ask ourselves, who are we learning from? Who are we speaking into? if we're not willing to be taught, we're not going to grow. We're not going to grow. And the beauty about that too is as we continue to grow, we can then also speak into other people. And when we begin to serve in that way, there's so much energy around that, because we're not made to just receive. We're also made to give. And no one ever does something generous and feels terrible about it. It usually feels great because we're wired for that. And so as we think about a willingness to be taught, there's a give and take that happens. And so I would just encourage all of us to consider, right, who are we receiving from? Like, is there pride that we need to let go of? Is there healing that needs to happen to where we can begin to take that courageous step of trusting someone else? Because if we're not willing to be taught, we're not going to grow. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Relational Recovery Podcast. We'll be back soon with a new conversation, and we'll see you then.